Appreciate y'all coming. And do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion.
And a second?
Yep, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any comments from the audience at this point? All right, moving right along to Darrin's general manager report, please.
All right, what we've got for you today is a PowerPoint. We can get it fired up. Well, everybody's seen the headlines so far. What we're looking at is a rate increase. And unfortunately, there's no way to varnish it or make it any prettier than what it is. What we're going to be proposing is we have an anticipated 16% increase. We would need the increase to begin on October 1st, 2024. Currently, we have UFS, which is an outside consultant. They're helping us to look at this to make sure that we are right on target with this 16% and what they may ultimately come up with. And again, this is anticipated, and I'll show you why and how come that 16%. We are going to make sure with UFS that when it is applied, that it goes to the residential, the commercial, the industrial. Each one of them has the appropriate percentages, and it's put in the right place so that nobody is carrying the weight of the other. And so that's why we have the consultant with their assistance. What is it coming from? When we buy our electricity, there's three things that we pay. Number one, we pay an electricity charge. This is a picture of Prairie State. This is down in Marissa, Illinois. We get approximately 20 megawatts of power every single day from this coal-fired power plant. And that is also where we get other energy from, is that we're getting it from hydro, we're getting it from nuclear, we're getting it from natural gas generation, we're getting it from renewables every single day. And so we have to have the end user, but it's the amount of kilowatt hours from the generators that we have to pay for. So that is one portion of our bill that we pay every single week. That's the power that simply burns and turns your motors, lights your rooms, keeps your homes cool and or heated. The second portion of the bill that we pay is transmission. And we have to take in all of those generators, wherever they might be throughout the MISO footprint, throughout the nation, we have to put it through power lines. And we take, and it costs us right around $2 million a year for our transmission. That varies up and down, and what happens is there's congestion. And so we actually go out and we have about 22 different lines that our consultants help us to have partial FTRs, financial transmission rights to those lines. They use them. If one becomes congested, we're able to go to the other and to the other and to the other. But that can range up or down. Sometimes those FTRs are positive, sometimes they're negative. But that's a cost that we have. It's becoming a constraint throughout the nation. This is a current short-term look at what's being proposed for transmission lines inside the MISO footprint. Good old Missouri, we're down here right smack dab in the middle. The nation recognizes that there is a shortage, that we're starting to constrain ourselves because of all of the different, particularly renewables that are being built. The future 1, 2, and 3, those are what's in the long term. And so long term being 5 years and more, but all of these are places where they recognize constraints and more needing to be done. The third part of our bill that we pay is called capacity. And capacity is what's catching us. Capacity is a measure of the amount of generation that's available throughout the entire MISO footprint versus the amount of demand. And for the last many years, we've always had more generation than we've had demand and need. The definition is electric capacity is the total amount of electricity generation available for consumption at any given time. And the any given time that they measure is the worst day of the year for every single community inside that footprint. So it looks at the hottest day, when no sun is shining and the wind isn't blowing, and when everybody has their air conditioning on and we actually have the greatest amount of demand versus the generation available. And what has happened in the last 2 years, that is for the first time in our history, flipped to where there is more demand than there is generation. Now what MISO does, they create a market right down here. The capacity market that they create is to incentivize electric generators to make enough power. And I believe what they've done in the past, at least with the electrification of America as it's gone forward, that has failed. Now, we are part of MISO, but there is a RTO, a transmission organization, over every single one of the states and the areas inside America. Over here is PJM, and if you can take and remember that guy, that stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland. Those guys, we'll talk about them a little bit later on. Here we are right inside Zone 5 of the MISO footprint. Now what happens is every April, May, they have an auction. And what MISO has done, they go through and they measure every one of the generators. They look at the demand, and then they take and they come up with a price for capacity. And what they're ultimately going to do is they're going to take the money that they collect from capacity and they're going to give it to generators so that they have more reason to build. And that's kind of upside down, if you ask me, but that's what they do. There is also a difference in how they measure accredited capacity. This is from MISO. It says fleet change. When we say fleet change, this means the mix of how much coal generation, how much hydro generation, how much nuclear generation, and how much natural gas and renewables, solar and wind. That change in mix is creating a gap between the region's levels of installed and accredited generation capacity. Installed capacity, the maximum amount of energy that resources could theoretically produce. What happens is if you put and build a 100-acre, 10-megawatt solar farm, well, on the hot day of the summer, it might produce almost that 10 megawatts. But they know in reality, they only give it 18% capacity because it's only an 18% of that is going to actually be available at the worst time when it's needed. And therefore, the accredited capacity has been brought down immensely because most of what's being built out there is coal is being retired. Both wind and solar is being built. Therefore, you're taking all the accredited capacity, removing it to a 18% of the nameplate. Historically, where we have cleared in pricing, Zone 5, right here, got to follow up and down. In 15-16, it was $3.48. In 16-17, it went up to $72. That cost us approximately $1.2 million for that 1 year. It then went down to $1.50, then $10, then $2.99, then $5, and then in 22-23, it went to $235. This year, it has gone to $719.81. And there's a couple of things that are very interesting about this. The MISO auction had gone from just 2 years ago, they went from what was an annual auction. So they were taking the worst day in summer, extrapolating that across all 365 days for one annual year. And they are saying that we now are going to do it on every single season. If you look at this, and they'll show it in another way, summer came in at $30. That was a very manageable number, not a big deal. Fall in Zone 5 came in at $719.81. Winter came in at 75 cents. And then brought to spring again, $718.81. Those numbers are what's going to cause us to have this rate increase. Zone 5 cleared at Cone, and the inadequate capacity sent this just through the roof. Why did it happen? Retirements and capacity issues of the transmission in and out. They also cut the ability of us to take power and credit, just the capacity, from Zone 4 into Zone 5.
Can you go back a slide?
What's that?
Can you go back a slide, please?
Sure.
Oh, one more, sorry. I just wanted to see the comparison from year to year. Like how much it changed from one year to the next. Basically, where I'm going with that is this $719, are we thinking it's going to be 2024 or 2025 and continue to trend up? Or is there possible, that's what I want to look at.
That's a great question. And if you've got the right crystal ball, you're a billionaire. We'll get to it. So I'm going to talk about where we're headed. We're looking at, so one of the things we did we fall down on the job? We went out and we were looking for every bit of capacity in Zone 5. We went out for 3 different RFIs. There was none. We went into Zone 4, which is Illinois, and we have that good old Marissa, Illinois, that's our coal plant. They were, because this hit Cone, which means it hit the very maximum, they said you might not get credit for the Marissa, Illinois generation capacity. They have what's called an HUC. It's a historical usage consideration. We were given it. There were a couple of there was at least one other community in Missouri that did not get that HUC, and they were caught even worse than we are. So there's some arbitrary decisions going on here. And with that, we have some activity that we're doing that I'm not going to say at this time, that we're going to be pushing back on to see if we can get some of these things corrected moving forward. Now, what happens going forward? We're going to have to continue to search for every bit of capacity that's created in Zone 5. And we're going to have to watch about the other coal plants that are coming offline.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So that's what happened right here. Here's our costs, and we are the only ones that got hit. Other states, $15 and $34 for their capacity in those zones. The influence on us is, as usual, we usually pay about $19 million a year in electricity, about $2 million in transmission. This is driving it up to $4.9 million in capacity this year. Why? Right up here. Due to the higher demand, so we still have people wanting more and more, and the capacity import limit. They stopped allowing us to get credit for capacity coming in from Zone 4. We had actually hedged capacity out of Zone 4. We're going to try and get credit for that in Zone 4. We're going to sell it in Zone 4. It'll be a wash. But if we'd have had that credit in, it would have saved us another couple of million. Again, these are rules. The biggest one that hit is this retired coal plant. Rush Island was taken offline on October 15th. It was taken offline on October 15th because they were being sued by the Sierra Club. Had they taken offline on October 31st, all those credits would have been available to us. So there's legal actions, lawfare going on that's getting us the retirement of coal units and planned maintenance. The other thing that happens is that your natural gas generators and your coal generators, because your peaks are done in the summertime and the wintertime, What they do is they wait till the spring and the fall to do a planned maintenance. Usually it's about a month. We actually go out and we hedge because we know that Prairie State, they do their maintenance in the fall, and we take and hedge for that 1 month to protect ourselves because they're going to be out of generation. We're going to have to be entirely on the market. It's not a bet. We do just fine with it. The problem is they took another generating plant and they stretched it for the entire season of the spring. And with that, that dropped that capacity entirely out on that spring, that shoulder season, which again, they recognize it was the coal units that were being retired early and the planned maintenance that hit that drove that price up. Normally, we're about $60,000 to $300,000 cost annually for that capacity. This time, $4.9 million. Yeah.
Why did it hit spring and fall? Because they do their planned maintenance. They don't do spring and fall both.
It was both. So what happens is this. So this is the second year that they've done the seasonal auction versus the annual auction. They call it the cost of new entry, that it hit this level, which then triggered both of them. I don't know any better than that. But we have a consultant. This is one of those things that we have questions on that we're pushing back through some other means that we're going to look for some remedy in the future. So one of the other problems with this is that for the last 2 years, we have rate covenants. When we have borrowed money for the project, we did our 161 line that we have, new line we put in. We have the Oakwood substation that we have rebuilt. Those covenants for that borrowing, they have a mechanism inside of it that says we have to maintain an income to debt ratio of 1.25. We have been below that now for well over a year because in 2023, we had capacity issues there, and we took from reserve $3.4 million to do that, to pay for that. With the board, you guys were generous and did that. It avoided a rate increase of that amount, but reserves are not income. And because it came from that reserve, it showed that we weren't making that ratio. We could handle that for a little bit. We reported it appropriately to our bond counsel, who reported it to those that hold the bonds. We would be in default for another year. Now there is a great concern. We need to get to that 1.25. We've told bond counsel we would. If things had stayed the same as last year, we would have made it. We'd have been all right. Paul, can you give us any color on what would happen if we don't maintain or meet these that bond ratio?
Yeah, so every year.
Paul, I'm going to ask you to step up to the microphone so we can record this.
When we have debt as a municipal, we have to file disclosures every year, annually, on that debt. Basically, a disclosure is an update on where you're at financially. They give some plans for the next coming year with capital, things like that. And so what they do with that, if you default on a covenant, you have to disclose that. And then along with that, you have to come back with a plan that gets you back into compliance. But theoretically, what could happen when you default is that the trustee could come and take the collateral, essentially, that you've put up with that debt. Obviously, that is very unlikely to happen. What's more likely to happen is that the trustee could force you to retain outside legal counsel that came in, sat down with you, went through everything, basically like an outside audit, to make sure that you have the right steps in place to get back into compliance. That's also, per bond counsel, very unlikely to happen. However, that likelihood does increase the more years in a row that you don't meet that covenant. So like Darrin was saying, this year was the second year in a row that we haven't met it. With next year, the increase in capacity, we're looking at 3 years in a row potentially, unless we do this rate increase.
I would explain this. Go ahead.
Also to note, maybe you can shed some light on that too. The default in this bond also potentially affects the city overall's bond rating. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. Yeah, potentially if the city were to go out and get financing, we, being an enterprise fund of the city, would be included in that rating that they'd have to get from a rating agency. So in one way, since we roll up in those financials, they would look at us in that way. So yeah, it could be a detriment to the city as well.
Thanks.
So of this 16% rate increase, the 15, if you take that 16, only 15% of that will be exactly for purchase power. Our rate increase last year, it helped us to pay for additional costs and inflation, et cetera, in materials and assets. Only a small 1% of all that might be added to the maintenance of the electric department. In other words, we're not getting any increase in salary. We're not increasing any of the benefits to our employees. We're meeting the requirements of our union, and almost none of it is going to anything other than perhaps paying for additional costs that I'll show you here in just a few minutes. So all of this is due to, this 16% rate increase is due to purchase power. And it's a pass-through cost. So the very first question is, what the heck is the BPW doing? You guys need to tighten your belt, and you got to cut back, and you've got to, all you guys do is raise rates. And I'll tell you that I think we've got to be very careful in that I think we've been what I call running a tight ship. What that means is a good old English idiom that we are running a very strict and effective way. We're not running fat. We're running very slim, and we're running a tight ship. Our financials are in order. Our people are working hard. We're doing a great job. Here are some of the things that we've done to cut back. FTEs. Actually, in the last couple of years, we've actually dropped by 11 positions. We've rehired 4 of them. But of that, 7 open positions that we continue on. We have the AMI metering that we've put into place. That AMI metering means we don't have to send someone out to do their turn on, turn off. The metering is more accurate. That has been a savings to all of the citizens and all of the people we serve. In some cases, we're enrolling in long-term maintenance agreements, such as Marco and some of those that make sense. On the other hand, we've also taken in third-party services we've reduced. We've moved them in-house. Also in the IT, in HVAC, we're not going out. In fleet maintenance, we're doing much of that ourselves. We're taking and doing that in-house, and we're not charging more for it. We're actually saving money because we're reducing the amount of third-party expenses. In-house server, Matthew has done a great job just recently with that in-house hosting, savings about $12,000 a year. Equipment replacement, what we're doing is we're pushing and tightening up on all of that, and we're making sure that it's lasting. We're taking and running it to end of life so that we're not replacing it too soon. If there's another 10% or 15% that we can get out of that piece of equipment, we're doing just exactly that. Paul, and now we won't take all credit for it, but our investment management, Paul has been very, very meticulous with it. Yes, this has to do with changing economy and bonds, but it also has to do with every single day taking care of what's going on. We've gone from 1.1% to 3.16% on all of our reserve. Again, asset replacement, others, depreciation schedules have been lengthened, vehicles lasting longer, pumps, PCs, etc. On our training, we have employees that must maintain licenses. We cannot run water plants, wastewater plants. We have to have certain accreditations in many of our positions. And with that training's essential. If we looked at the expenses from 2015 to 2019 for our training, that was about $182,000 a year. Since 2021 to present, we're at $66,000 per year. That's a pretty significant reduction. Tree trimming. We set out a while ago to make sure that our system was completely cleared. This year, we've been able to back off, and we have dropped an entire crew from tree trimming. We'll still keep the other two going, but we are saving $200,000 in tree trimming this year. Reduction in overtime. We have been proactive in our efforts. One of them is that with our videoing and point repair for sewer, the number of overtime call-outs, when I first got here, we were at about 3 to 4 a month. Overtime calls because of overflows. We are now down to less than 1 a month. Water loss, we've worked very diligently at driving that number down. And with that also, we were very aggressive at hitting any all leaks, even small leaks. And with that, we've seen a reduction in overtime. Back to the tree trimming, not only have we saved that crew from this year for $200,000, we've seen a reduction in the cost of our storm repair and storm responses. In 2021, our storm response, emergency response cost was $275,000. The next year, 2022, it dropped to $217,000. In 2023, so far, we have spent zero, and this year, zero on that emergency response. Now, again, it is a factor of how severe the storms have been, but I would submit that we've had some pretty good ones come through, some straight wind events, and because of our tree trimming, we've been able to keep the lights on. So those are actually things that we've done to be efficient and to cut back and to reduce the costs and to control costs. There's also some expenses that are flat out beyond our control. Chemicals at the wastewater treatment plant, 71% increase in just 4 years. At the water treatment plant, 115% increase in 5 years. That's pretty significant, and we do not see it going down. Materials, including transformers, probably one of the best examples. Some are averaging about 200% increase, while we have some of our 50 kV transformers are almost 5 to 6 times. And they're staying up. It's not coming down. One of the things that the government has decided is that they want to have efficient transformers. They're looking at saving about 2% or less by doing a new type of transformer, and they're going to force everybody to do it, which would cost us an entire change out of every transformer in our system. If that happens, it will be absolutely crushing. We have insurance, health insurance going up. Property insurance has gone up 50% in just 5 years. The other thing that we have to look at is supply chain issues is the timing. We still have to deal with transformers that aren't delivered for 12 to 18 months, especially the larger ones. So we've got to make sure that we're continuing on the path of replacement at the Indian Mound substation, et cetera. And our vehicles, some of the larger ones, it's going to take us 2 to 3 years to get them built and delivered. So those are still things that we don't have any control of, that we have to plan for. We are calling on the community. Erica is doing a great job as we have times when there are peaks coming. We warn people of it. We invite people to turn down their thermostat a couple of degrees, maybe in the wintertime, up a couple of degrees in the summertime. Anything we can do, we're trying to get that out the best we can. Now, here's your good question, Darryl. What's in the future? A 2023 MISO survey suggests that the region's limit of committed resources will decline going forward, with a potential shortfall of 2.1 gigawatts occurring as soon as 2025 and growing larger over time, the report says. This is the mix that we talked about. The dates are 2005, long time ago, 2020, just 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and what they anticipate in the future. There's two squares there, well, a couple that I would have you pay attention to. The first one is the big black one, 76%, that's coal. We do have the Prairie State coal We anticipate that it is absolutely under fire. I'll show you just how. We anticipate that that coal will be going away in the future. By 2030, it'll be diminished from 7 to 3% is what they're anticipating. The amount of natural gas will go from 34 currently, roughly, to between 45 and 55% of the mix. That's still going to be the major source. You have to have at least 50% of your source has to be a reliable source that you can call on in the middle of the night when the sun's not shining. The other one to look at is the green. We can see that in 2020, 13% of our load comes from renewables, but they're not reliable. And we're looking at between 20 and 34% of our fuel mix becoming renewables. And they say as this renewable increases, their accreditation will also decrease. This up here, if you can't see it, sorry, in the back, this is 18%. So wind and solar are what you might call 18% reliable. As we add more and more into that mix, they're telling us that they're going to lower that accreditation. So it's going to go even lower from 18 to 16 to whatever it might be. But they're going to drop it more and more as more and more renewable hits the market, therefore driving up the need to have a spinning reserve somewhere, a spinning turbine that can be called on when the sun isn't shining. This, if you look at the date, that's kind of an interesting date. August 12th, 2024. That was a week ago. Illinois power plant must face Sierra Club air pollution lawsuit. This is Prairie State. What happened is that they have been operating under a permit, and until the next permit is given, they operate under that permit. Well, they're saying that this permit has run out. This is something that's common, and yet they now have a judge in Illinois that says, yes, this is actionable, and that the lawsuit can go forward. So it's going to be under attack, and we'll see how well Prairie State, which we are part, we own it through MPUA, who owns a portion of it. This is a very important asset for us. Grain belt. We talk about, we have a contract for 15 megawatts of grain belt. As soon as they can get it to us, it's a very favorable price for electricity. It doesn't bring us much of anything so far as capacity, but we're looking forward to it. But this is one of those things that constrains the ability to get capacity, is that they're trying to build the power line. Well, this is where, again, the date, August 9th, 10 days ago, where a court in Illinois have pulled the permit for grain belt going across the state of Illinois. They've revoked the certificate. The argument is that they've made is that even though they've got the right-of-ways and could begin construction of the line, they don't believe they have the money to build it. And that seems like an odd argument, but that's what they've got going. Remember I said PJM. PJM stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland. This is our co-RTO to the east of us. They too have gone from, again, end of July, $2.2 billion was their cost for capacity, has now gone to $14.7 billion in capacity. They are looking at many places in Maryland having up to a 24% increase in their rates. We have a question before MISO where we're saying we sit here on the border, on the Mississippi River right here, and we get a lot of our power through Illinois zone. We're in zone 5, they're in zone 4. And we're saying, will you consider taking and removing this constraint? Because we have contracts, we have transmission lines that we have under contract that allows us to take power from zone 4. Why is that a constraint for us? And so that is another question that we're having taken up in an appropriate way. We hope that they can take a look at that. In the past, they've considered combining Zone 4 and Zone 5 because we actually physically play well together, but they that's an argument for MISO. This is an interesting chart. This is the years, and here is the rate of increase that the BPW has installed. This is inflation. And so even though everybody, all we do is we just raise rates. Well, we did it once in 2015, and it was a 5% increase. Did it again in 2017, but it was actually a 0.62% decrease. Last year, we did our 9.5% increase. We hadn't had one in over an increase in over, from 15 to 23. And then this year, because of capacity, not because of our management of the system, we have to propose this 16% increase. That puts us in total at 29.8 versus 30.55% increase in inflation since 2014. So here's what our proposal is. In 2025 to 26, what we were doing is we were seeking for both immediate and long-term capacity in Zone 5. We've had a little bit of success in this already, but we don't have any guarantees. And so we're remiss to make any commitments at this time. Second, if we get it secured, if we are able to get that capacity in Zone 5 and at a lower price, we will lower rates accordingly. If you want to take a picture of that, go right ahead. And then finally, we are looking seriously at becoming self-reliant in generation. And we have a high-level study underway currently to see about something out at the industrial park. That is all I have. Any questions?